Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys making some time to check the video out and spending some time with me today. We're going to be talking about rod length. I'm going to give an in-depth tutorial on the best length of rod to use under what situations. I think this is something that does not get talked about very much, and I think there's some misconceptions about why certain people should use certain length rods based upon like their height and their stature and their age. But I'm going to bust a few myths with that and give you guys some good tips and advice on choosing the right rod length here. Also, guys, just our dreaded daily housekeeping tip. Wanted to remind you guys about a couple of different things we have for you guys at fishthemoment.com. We got our virtual lessons where you guys can book a one-on-one lesson with me on a Zoom call to go over anything you want to about fishing. And we've got our winter Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns up on the website now. So this is a great resource to get some good places for winter. We also have our maps for the entire year, all 4 seasons up there too. So I'll put that information in the description here. So much appreciated there. Okay, guys, rod lengths. A lot of people don't really talk about it that much, and I think a lot of people, when they talk about rods, they focus on some stuff that maybe is not as quite as important as the things you really need to focus on. Now, here's one of the deals with it, guys. One of the reasons I've got so sort of fascinated in depth, and I spend so much time and attention to rod length, is the fact that when I started bass fishing, I didn't have very much money, and I didn't even have enough money to go to the lake very often. So what I had to do as far as to get good at fishing, I had to take advantage about what I had. I'm getting my camera straight here, but I had to take advantage of what I could do that didn't cost me money. And one of the things that I could do is I could practice my casting with various different rods. And eventually I was able to win the Bass Pro Shop National Casting Competition, the top caster in the United States, simply because I did it a lot, and I couldn't afford to do anything else. I didn't have money to go to the lake, so I just spent all my time casting. So I got really familiar with rod length as far as how it affects your ability to cast with different lures and manipulate action on lures. Now, first of all, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is a lot of people think that rod length should be in relationship to like how tall you are as a person. I don't care if you're 5 feet tall or if you're 7 feet tall. It doesn't have anything to do with it. Rod length is all about putting the proper action and cadence and manipulating the ability. It gives you the ability to manipulate the lure correctly. It's not about your size or anything like that. If you're an adult, or even if you're a teenager or something like that, you can handle any rod length out there, even if you're 5 feet tall. So when you think in terms of a rod length, guys, think in terms of each specific rod for the job that it has to do with the lure category, because different lure categories require different things out of certain rods. For an example, if I use a rod over, say, 7 feet in length out there, say if I'm using anything like 7 foot 2 inches up to 8 foot, which is, pitching and flipping, or maybe some larger stuff like swim baits and spinner baits and some chatter baits, larger type rods like that. This is a category of rod that it doesn't require a lot of wrist manipulation. So when you're talking about going to a longer rod over 7 foot, don't think in terms that you're going to need that length in there or the action as far as being able to impart action or put action on a lure like that. When you're using a longer rod, it's more about a straight retrieve or controlling the cadence of your bait, or the speed of your bait, or the rhythm of your bait with your reel handle, like a stop and go or half turn like that. When you go to a rod length of over 7 foot, it hinders your ability to put a lot of wrist manipulation on a rod like that. So for your lure categories out there, you're not going to be using a rod. If you're using a rod over 7 foot, you're not going to be using lures with it that require a lot of manipulation, like a jerk bait. Now, for example, if you are using a jerk bait, or even maybe sometimes a crankbait, or even a spinner bait, something that you actually need to put some action on it to make the bait come alive, you need to go to a rod length of under 7 feet. Not like super short, but normally say that 6 feet 8 inch to 6 feet 11 inch. And there's a big difference, guys. There's a huge difference between a 6 foot 11 inch rod, which I consider perfect for like a jerk bait or manipulating wrist action like that, and a 7 foot rod or a 7 2-foot rod. If you try to work, for example, a jerk bait, if you try to work a jerk bait on a 7 foot 2 inch rod, I don't care if it's, whatever action the rod is, the rod, you simply can't get that snap to it, that is required by certain lures on there. But if you have something 6'10", there's something about the length of that allows for that quick snap that you have to have. It makes a huge difference with that. And most of the time, guys, I never go to anything under 6.5 foot. The shortest rods that I ever use are like 6 foot 10 inch, and that's usually for something that requires a lot of wrist action, like a walking topwater, like a spook or megabass diamante or something, or a jerk bait, maybe something like a fluke, something that requires quick snap of the wrist like that. It has a big impact with it. Now, another thing that you have to consider besides wrist action and lure manipulation is your casting distance and your hook setting ability, because the longer rod that you have, it's going to give you an ability to make a longer cast, and it's also going to take up more line on the hook set. So those lure categories out there that require longer casts, like say, big crankbaits like that, maybe some big swim baits that you really have to get way out there. Sometimes you need a little bit longer rod. And also with those same lure categories, say for example, if you're throwing a big lipless crankbait, like a 3/4 ounce lipless crankbait, and you make a long cast out there and you get a bite out at the end of that cast, by having a long rod, like a 7.5 foot length rod, when you set the hook on that fish from a long distance out there, the amount of line that you pull with that longer rod is significantly more than like a 6.5 foot rod. So I always go to like a 7 foot 5 inch rod or something 7.5 foot, 7.6, if I'm using those lures that I really have to get out there and make those strong hook sets with. But the main thing, guys, is don't look at rod as far as your rod length as something that's comfortable or not comfortable to you. Look at it as your ability to properly put the right cadence and retrieve on the lure, and then have the combination of the casting distance and hook setting ability. That's what you need to look for, because even if you pick up a rod, say for example, if you're not very tall, say you're 5 foot tall or something like that, and you have a rod that is like super long out there that feels a little uncomfortable, just try to take a chance, just try to use it, and eventually you're going to get used to the way the thing feels in there, and then you can take full advantage of the capabilities of that rod. And obviously the length of the rod, every rod length has different tapers to it. It's got a different tip taper to it. It's got different butt section on it, so every rod is going to be unique to itself with that. And also the handle length needs to be comfortable too. You want a handle out there that gives you enough length on there to have a little bit of leverage, but you don't want it long enough to where it's just constantly knocking your elbow and your forearm with that. So anyway, guys, I'll put in the link here, I'll put some of my favorite rods in there as far as the Tackle Warehouse description if you guys want to check some out. But overall, I can tell you right now, to simplify things out there, if you guys want to try to simplify your rod selection in terms of not having to buy every rod on the market, you need one rod that's like 6 foot 10 inch, 6 foot 10 or 6 foot 11. That's going to give you the maximum wrist action, topwater, spooks, that type of stuff like that. And then you need some type of rod right around that 7 foot range, for different lures like crankbaits and chatterbaits and spinnerbaits. And then you need some rod in the 7.5 foot range, pitching and flipping, Alabama rigs, big swim baits, something like that. So you can get by with 3 different actions: 6'11", 7'2", 7.5 foot, something like that, or 7'10", whatever a flipping stick is, and that usually covers it pretty good. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out, and we'll talk later. See y'all.